Have you ever wondered if the ancient trees whispering in the wind are sharing warnings from long-buried graves, or if that forgotten trail you stumbled upon leads not to a scenic overlook, but to the unmarked tomb of forgotten sins where the soil still thirsts for more? Deep in the shadowed heart of Olympic National Park, where the Quinault River carves its eternal path through moss-draped giants, Alex Harper learned the hard way that some secrets the woods hold are meant to stay entombed, clawing their way back, only when innocence dares to dig too deep. It was the summer of 2023, a sweltering July that had chased Alex, a 28-year-old graphic designer from the rain-soaked streets of Seattle, into the wild for solace after his world shattered like cheap glass under the heel of betrayal. His girlfriend of 5 years had left him for a barista with a man bun and a trust fund, packing her things while he was at a client meeting, leaving behind a note that read like a haiku of heartbreak. "I need more than pixels and promises." The pain gnawed at him like a persistent itch, so he loaded his Subaru Forester with the essentials of escape: a compact Kelty one-person tent, a Western mountaineering sleeping bag good down to 20 below, a Jetboil stove for quick coffee, a Garmin GPS Map 66i for emergencies, a few freeze-dried Mountain House meals that tasted like regret reheated, and his faithful Leatherman Wave multi-tool that had seen him through countless urban hikes. No phone, no playlists, no distractions, just the raw pulse of the forest to drown out the echo of her laughter in his empty apartment. He filed for a backcountry permit online, targeting a primitive site off the Quinault Loop Trail, about 8 miles from the trailhead at Graves Creek, where the maps promised unmaintained paths, no facilities, bare canisters required. It was the kind of place where solitude wasn't just possible. It was enforced by the labyrinth of ferns and fallen logs that swallowed the unwary whole. The drive from Seattle took 4 hours, the I-5 corridor blurring into a gray smear of strip malls and semis, before the Olympics rose like jagged teeth against the horizon, their peaks wreathed in perpetual mist. Alex arrived at the ranger station just after noon, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and pine sap, a far cry from the exhaust fumes of the city. The ranger, a grizzled woman in her 50s with a name tag reading Pat and eyes like polished agates, stamped his permit with a thud that echoed his resolve. "Watch for black bears," she warned, her voice gravelly from years of shouting over wind and waves. "And don't veer off trail. We've had folks go missing up there, turned up weeks later looking like they wrestled a wolverine and lost." Alex nodded, forcing a smile, but her words lodged in his gut like a half-swallowed fishbone. He shouldered his 35-liter Osprey pack, the weight a comforting anchor, and hit the trail under a sky of fractured blue, the sun slanting through the canopy in golden shafts that danced like fireflies on speed. The path wound upward, roots twisting like arthritic fingers across the dirt, ferns brushing his jeans with feathery insistence. Birdsong filled the air, varied thrushes trilling their eerie, descending whistles, ravens croaking philosophical debates from invisible perches. By 3 p.m., sweat plastered his gray REI hoodie to his back, but the burn in his thighs felt like purification, each step exorcising the ghost of her perfume clinging to his skin. 4 miles in, the trail forked unexpectedly, the left branch marked by a faded blaze on a cedar trunk, the right vanishing into a thicket of salal bushes heavy with berries that stained his fingers purple when he paused to snack. His GPS chirped a waypoint confirmation for the left, but something, a flicker of sunlight through the overgrowth on the right perhaps, or the masochistic pull of the unknown, drew him astray. "What's the worst that could happen?" he muttered, veering right, the underbrush closing around him like a living shroud. The game trail narrowed, forcing him to duck under low-hanging branches that scratched his arms like jealous lovers, drawing thin lines of blood that he wiped away with the back of his hand. The river's murmur faded behind him, replaced by an oppressive silence, broken only by the crunch of his boots on needle-strewn ground. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely 30 minutes, he emerged into a clearing not on any map he'd studied. A meadow no larger than a suburban backyard, ringed by colossal Sitka spruces, whose trunks were girdled with emerald moss, their crowns knitting a ceiling that filtered daylight to a subdued twilight. In the center, a flat expanse of mossy granite overlooked a bend in the Quinault. the water churning silver below, flecked with foam from recent rains. It was perfect, primal, untouched. Alex's heart swelled with a fierce, possessive joy. He dropped his pack with a sigh of relief, the straps leaving red welts on his shoulders like badges of survival. Setting up camp became a ritual of redemption. He cleared a fire ring from the granite ringed with stones, mossy as forgotten gravestones, and gathered tinder. Dry bark from fallen hemlocks, twigs snapped with satisfying cracks. Larger branches dragged from the tree line that left his palms sticky with resin. The jet boil hissed to life on a whisper of butane, boiling water for a pouch of beef stroganoff that steamed with artificial comfort. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of crimson and indigo, he struck flint to steel, coaxing flames from a nest of birch shavings until the fire crackled with greedy hunger, casting flickering shadows that danced like specters across the trees. Dinner devoured, he leaned against his pack, journal in lap, scribbling by firelight. Day 1. The woods don't judge. They just are. No more second-guessing. This is my reset. The words flowed, cathartic, until the chill deepened, the temperature plummeting to the mid-40s as stars pricked the velvet dome overhead. Around 10 p.m., he crawled into the tent, the nylon whispering as he zipped the door, cocooning himself in the sleeping bag's downy embrace. Exhaustion claimed him swiftly, a dreamless void where the city's clamor couldn't reach. But at 2:30 a.m., biology intruded with insistent urgency. The Stroganoff's revenge, or perhaps the river's hypnotic call. Groggy, cursing under his breath, Alex fumbled for his Petzl headlamp, its beam a hesitant yellow finger in the Stygian black. He yanked on his boots without laces, socks forgotten in the haste, and unzipped the tent, stepping into air crisp as shattered ice, gooseflesh rippling across his arms. The fire had dwindled to a constellation of embers, pulsing like dying stars, and the meadow lay shrouded in fog that coiled at ankle height like spectral hounds. He trudged 20 yards toward a cluster of rhododendrons for modesty, the moss muffling his steps, each breath pluming white in the beam. That's when his left boot prodded something anomalous, not the yielding give of duff, but a flat resistance, cool and unyielding as polished slate. Frowning, he knelt, sweeping the light across the intrusion, a rectangle of weathered wood, perhaps 3 feet by 2, half buried under a millennium's detritus of leaves and lichen, its edges feathered with rot but intact, as if preserved by some unnatural pact with the soil. Crude etchings marred its surface, interlocking spirals that evoked Celtic knots gone feral, interspersed with what resembled a splayed hand, fingers elongated into claws, all inked in a char that flaked like scabbed skin. Curiosity, that double-edged blade, overrode caution. Alex's fingers, numb with cold, clawed at the overgrowth, revealing not a mere board, but a hatch, hinged on rusted iron straps that creaked like the hinges of hell when he tested them. The air escaping the seam hit him first, a fetid exhalation, musty as an attic undisturbed for decades, laced with the metallic tang of old pennies or something far worse, something that evoked the coppery bite of blood left to congeal. His pulse quickened to a staccato drum in his ears, 110 beats per minute and climbing, but the pull was magnetic, a siren song from the earth's bowels. Just a quick look, he whispered to the indifferent night, prying the hatch with the leatherman's pliers, the wood splintering with a sound like breaking bones. It yielded with reluctance, swinging upward on a puff of dust motes that swirled in the beam like vengeful spirits. Rough-hewn steps descended into obscurity, 10 in total, carved from compacted clay and schist, slick with seepage that gleamed like oil. Against every survival seminar's dictum, leave no trace, take nothing but pictures. He descended, the light bobbing with each cautious footfall, the walls closing in with claustrophobic intimacy, roots protruding like questing veins. At the bottom, the chamber unfolded. A cramped vault, 8 feet square walls of rammed earth, buttressed by crumbling timber struts, shelves hewn into the rock sagging under the weight of decayed crates, their slats furred with mold that released spores like a sigh when disturbed. Alex's breath came shallow, the air stagnant and heavy, pressing on his chest like an unwanted embrace. He cracked the nearest crate with the multi-tool saw blade, hinges protesting, revealing a cascade of brittle parchment, yellowed journals from the 1920s, pages warped by damp, inked in a spidery hand that chronicled the Evergreen Brethren, a logging cult that worshipped the old growth as deities demanding tribute in blood and bone. Entries detailed the harvest, rituals where rivals were bound and interred alive beneath the stumps of felled titans, their screams muffled by the axe song of progress. One passage, dated March 14th, 1923, chilled him deeper than the 40-degree draft. The debt mounts, 12 souls offered, yet the trees hunger. The pit claims the unworthy, their essence feeding the roots that bind our fortune. Heart slamming now at 140, he swept the beam wider, catching glints on the far wall, a row of tin canisters rusted to flaky patina, one ajar with a spill of sepia photographs tumbling like autumn leaves. He gathered them, hands trembling, the images materializing in the light. Stern men in wool mackinaws and gallust breeches, grinning with saws over prostrate redwoods, their eyes alight with fanatic zeal. But the final sheaf twisted the knife. Blurry exposures of the same faces, gaunt and hollowed, clustered around a yawning excavation, ropes frayed in their fists. In the pit's depths, shrouded forms huddled, human contours unmistakable, limbs akimbo in eternal supplication, cloth sacks overhead stained dark. On the verso of the last, in graphite smudged by thumbs long rotted to dust. Flesh for the forest's favor. The woods keep what they claim, ours forever. Panic ignited like dry tinder. Alex dropped the photos, scrambling backward, his headlamp clanging against a beam, stars exploding in his vision. He bolted up the steps 3 at a time, shin slicing open on the hatch's jagged lip, hot blood sheeting down his leg in a sticky rivulet that soaked his sock. Slamming the plank shut with a shoulder that throbbed in protest, he heaped armfuls of detritus over it, branches, boulders, anything to reseal the tomb, his breath's ragged sobs in the fog-shrouded meadow. Back in the tent, he burrowed deep, sleeping bag zipped to his chin. But sleep was a fugitive, every rustle of wind through needles a footfall, every hoot of owl a muffled plea from below. Paranoia bloomed, insidious. Were those shadows lengthening toward his nylon sanctuary? Footprints in the dew-kissed moss that matched no boot tread. Dawn crept in at 5:47 a.m., gray and grudging, the fog lifting like a veil torn from a bride's corpse. He struck camp in a frenzy. Tent collapsed in minutes, pack cinched so tight the straps bit into flesh. The GPS, battery at 12%, guided him back to the trail, but the forest felt altered, watchful, branches snagging with intent, roots tripping like snares, whispers on the breeze, or madness. He hit the trailhead by 11, collapsing into the Subaru, hands white-knuckled on the wheel as he sped to Forks, pulling into a diner reeking of grease and despair. Over black coffee that scalded his tongue, he unburdened to a park ranger patrol nursing pie at the counter. 2 men in crisp green, badges glinting like accusations. They listened. Forks paused mid-air, then shared a glance heavy with unspoken lore. Olympics Archives held the Brethren's shadow, a splinter sect of wobblies turned zealots, vanishing 12 loggers between 1918 and 1925. Bodies never exhumed, but sites like his anomaly, cordoned in faded ink on surveys yellowed as the photos. "Folks say the trees remember," the older ranger murmured, voice low as confession. "Roots drink deep, don't go digging where you ain't invited." They escorted him to the station, filing an incident report that vanished into bureaucracy's maw, the site gated with fresh chain link by week's end. Alex returned to Seattle a husk, nights plagued by dreams of spirals coiling tighter, the handprint branding his palm in phantom ink. He sold the gear on Craigslist, now hikes only lit paths in Discovery Park, crowds his buffer against the wild's grudge. Solo camping? A folly forsaken. But late nights, staring at ceiling cracks like veins, he wonders, did he leave the hatch sealed, Or does something slither free on moonless eves, seeking the next fool to unearth its kin? The woods, you see, don't forget. They forgive nothing, hoarding horrors in their heartwood, waiting for the spark of curiosity to ignite the pyre. And if you're planning that backcountry jaunt, listener, ask yourself, what secrets might your flashlight uncover? And would you survive the knowing? The Quinault flows on, indifferent, its banks lined with sentinels that nod in agreement, branches creaking like laughter suppressed. Imagine pitching your love nest under a canopy of redwoods, toasting marshmallows to the crackle of flames, and the promise of forever only to awaken to the acrid stench of desperation and eyes glowing like embers in the dark where a hidden hamlet of the damned lurks just beyond the tree line, hungry for your warmth and your screams. In the fog-choked badlands of Northern California's Del Norte, Coast Redwoods State Park, Jordan Reyes and his girlfriend Mia Delgado discovered that romance in the wild can curdle into terror faster than milk left in the sun, their 2022 anniversary getaway unraveling into a gauntlet of chemical fog and feral shadows that still haunts their whispers 3 years on. Jordan, a 26-year-old software engineer with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and a laugh that could disarm a room, had planned the trip meticulously, poring over All Trails reviews and Reserve California bookings from his cramped studio in San Francisco's Mission District. Mia, 24, a barista-slash-aspiring poet with tattoos of laurel wreaths curling up her forearms and eyes the color of storm-tossed sea glass, dreamed of stargazing spots where the Milky Way draped like a lover's shawl. They rented a cherry-red Mustang convertible top down to whip wind through their hair, loaded it with a North Face 2-person base camp tent, a Coleman double-burner stove for gourmet foil packet dinners, a cooler stocked with local IPAs and heirloom tomatoes from the Ferry Building, a Canon EOS Rebel for Mia's Instagram aesthetic, and a portable Anker power bank, because even romantics need to charge their vibes.
The itinerary: 2 nights at the park's Primos site, along the Damnation Creek Trail, a 4-mile descent to hidden beaches where seals barked like asthmatic walruses and waves crashed in symphonic fury. Day 1 dawned golden, the drive up Highway 101, a blur of eucalyptus groves and roadside taquerias, where they devoured carnitas, burritos slathered in salsa verde, grease dripping onto napkins scribbled with Mia's haikus about freedom's salt sting.
They hit the park gates by 4 p.m., the ranger booth manned by a bored teen scrolling TikTok, waving them through with a perfunctory, "Bears are active, hang your food." The trailhead parking lot was half empty, a smattering of Subarus and Airstreams testament to the shoulder season lull in late September, when summer crowds ebbed but autumn rains hadn't yet turned paths to sluice. They hiked in under a sky of bruised lavender, the air redolent of redwood duff and briny ocean breath, ferns arching overhead like cathedral vaults. The site was a dream, a level pad ringed by 300-foot titans, a fire ring charred from 1,000 campfires, and a view through the trees to the Pacific's restless churn, white caps flecking the horizon like scattered pearls. Jordan hammered tent stakes with rhythmic thwacks, the mallet a proxy for frustrations at code bugs that plagued his days, while Mia arranged fairy lights on guy lines, their amber glow promising enchantment. The stove flared blue, searing salmon fillets rubbed with dill and lemon zest, paired with quinoa salad dotted with feta crumbles, washed down with lagunitas that fizzed like flirtation. As dusk bled into night, they kindled a blaze from gathered alder, flames leaping to lick the chill from bones, roasting marshmallows on coat hanger skewers until gooey and gold, Jordan smearing one across Mia's nose in a giggle that dissolved into a kiss, tasting of char and sweetness. They lay on a shared therma rest, wrapped in a wool blanket from her abuela's attic, tracing Orion's belt in the star-pricked vault, her head on his chest, heartbeat sinking to the waves' distant thunder. "This is us against the world," he murmured, fingers tracing the ink on her skin. Sleep came easy in the tense womb, zipped tight against the night's velvet throat. But at 1:15 a.m., a distant rumble, not thunder, but engines, guttural and throaty like beasts in rut, shattered the idyll. Jordan stirred, chalking it to logging trucks on some unseen access road, rolling over to reclaim the dream where they built a cabin here, windows framing eternity. Mia, a lighter sleeper forged by city sirens, bolted upright at the growl's crescendo, her whisper sharp as shattered glass. "Jay, that's not right. Sounds like... motorcycles?" He fumbled for the headlamp, beam slicing the nylon like a scalpel, illuminating her wide eyes reflected back in miniature panic. They unzipped a flap, peering out into fog that had rolled in thick as cream, swallowing the trees in milky obscurity, the fire reduced to sullen coals that hissed defiance. The rumble peaked, then cut to a sputter, followed by voices, low, jagged, laced with the slurry drawl of the profoundly altered. Laughter erupted, hyena harsh, echoing from the gloom beyond their sight, words slurring into incoherence. "Fresh meat. Look at the shiny ride. Bet they got candy in that cooler." Jordan's gut twisted, a primal clench. Mia's hand clamped his arm, nails digging crescents. "We pack and go," he hissed. But the Mustang keys were in the tent pocket, and the trail back was pitch black, a 4-mile gauntlet through root-tripped darkness. Instead, they hunkered, lights off, breaths held shallow as suspects in a lineup, praying the interlopers would pass like a storm cloud. They didn't. Footfalls crunched, boots on gravel, deliberate, circling their perimeter like sharks scenting chum. Whispers infiltrated the fog. "Smell that? Hippie weed or something sweeter?" A silhouette materialized at the tree line, tall and gaunt, hooded in a threadbare Carhartt jacket, face obscured but eyes catching the dying ember glow like twin coals in a skull. He lingered, head cocked as if listening to their heartbeats, then barked a laugh that devolved into a racking cough. Phlegm hawked into the duff. More shapes coalesced. 5, no 7, emerging from the mist like wraiths summoned from a fever dream. Their forms twitchy, limbs jerking with the marionette spasms of chronic meth use, skin sallow under the pallor of perpetual night. One, a woman with hair matted into dreads like unraveling ropes, dragged on a cigarette, the cherry flaring orange as she exhaled a plume that reeked of burning plastic and despair. They didn't approach directly. Instead, they ringed the sight, murmuring in a patois of paranoia and possession, words fragmenting. "Guardians of the hollow. The redwood's whisper who pays the toll. Fresh blood for the vein tree." Jordan's mind raced. Hikers? Poachers? But the eyes, oh God, the eyes. Dilated black pools, pupils swallowing irises, fixed on the tent with a hunger that transcended flesh. Mia stifled a whimper, her poet's imagination conjuring cannibals from the canopy. Jordan gripped the Leatherman, its blade a toothpick against the tide. The standoff stretched, minutes elastic as taffy, the group's murmurs swelling to a chant, rhythmic and ritualistic, syllables mangled but insistent. Hollow take, hollow give, share the fire or feed the roots. A bottle sailed from the shadows, shattering against the granite fire ring in a spray of glass and foamy liquid. Beer? Worse, the stench suggested homebrew rotgut, fermented in rusted drums. Shards tinkled like chimes of doom, one nicking Mia's ankle through the tent floor, blood welling warm and accusatory. Jordan tensed, ready to lunge, but the leader, the tall one, stepped forward, his voice a rasp like sandpaper on bone. "Come out, lovebirds. The village welcomes. We got stories round the pipe, secrets the trees bleed." Village? The word landed like a gut punch. Jordan recalled a forum post on Reddit's California hiking, whispers of Redwood Hollow, an off-grid squatter enclave born from the '08 crash, loggers turned tweakers haunting fire roads, preying on the lost with hospitality that ended in haze and haze alone. No services, the sign had lied. This was a sinkhole of souls, the fog their veil, the redwoods complicit giants sheltering the forsaken. Mia's whisper broke. "Jay, the keys. Run." But the circle tightened, shadows merging into a perimeter of predatory patience. One figure, a boy no older than 15, face pitted like lunar craters, rattling a chain that clinked like manacles. Terror fermented into action. Jordan unzipped the far side, the sound a zipper of fate, and they exploded out in a tangle of limbs and blanket. Bolting for the trailhead path, headlamp beam flailing wild as a drunkard's lantern. Shouts erupted behind. "Thieves! The hollow claims!" Punctuated by the rev of engines, dirt bikes roaring to life like mechanical demons. The Mustang's keys jangled in Jordan's fist, but the trail was a black maw, roots snaring ankles, branches whipping faces like vengeful spirits. Mia stumbled first, knee twisting on an exposed root, a cry escaping that spurred the pursuit. Tires chewing gravel, beams lancing the fog like accusatory fingers. Jordan hauled her up, arm around waist, half carrying as they plunged downward, lungs burning with the exertion, the acrid tang of exhaust mingling with redwood resin. A bike crested the rise, headlight pinning them like butterflies to cork. The riders whoop a banshee wail. Share or share the dirt. Distance closed. 50 yards, 30. The chain rattling like a serpent's tail. Desperation birthed miracle. Jordan spotted a side spur, overgrown with blackberry brambles that tore at flesh like barbed wire kisses, dragging Mia into the thicket as thorns drew blood in rivulets. They collapsed in a hollow under Salal, holding breath as the pack thundered past, engines Doppler fading into the night. Dawn found them huddled, scratched and shivering, the Mustang untouched, but the cooler ransacked, IPAs guzzled, tomatoes pulped into abstract art on the hood. They fled the park without breakfast, tires screaming on asphalt back to the city, where showers scoured skin but not souls. Police reports yielded shrugs, known issue, but jurisdiction's a bitch, and a vague promise of patrols that never came. Mia's poetry turned dark, verses of hollows that hunger, while Jordan codes with doors locked, windows barred. Redwood Hollow persists in whispers, a meth-fueled mirage where love's fire draws moths to madness. Camp with care, wanderer. The night hides villages where shadows trade flesh for fleeting highs, and once invited, escape demands a toll steeper than silence. The redwoods stand sentinel, branches creaking approval, fog their shroud for the swallowed. What if the trail you chose for healing led not to catharsis, but to a crevasse where the devil himself etched packs in blood-soaked soil and the rocks echo with the final gasps of lovers who trusted the dark too much? In the sweltering embrace of Arkansas's Devil's Den State Park, a tragic double murder in the fall of 2024 transformed hikers Emily Carter and her fiancé Liam Voss from wide-eyed adventurers to footnotes in a killer's ledger. Their story, a cautionary dirge that ripples through campfire circles, warning that some dens harbor demons in human skin. Emily, 29, a pediatric nurse from Little Rock with a smile that lit ER triage like dawn and curls the color of autumn maple, had proposed the trip as therapy after a grueling shift-saving preemies from the brink. Liam, 31, a high school history teacher whose passion for Civil War lore rivaled his love for her, packed his Kelty frame pack with dog-eared paperbacks on Ozark folklore, dreaming of ruins where whispers of lost Confederates lingered. They opted for the Yellow Rock Trail, a 3-mile loop through honey locust groves and sandstone bluffs, the park's crown jewel with vistas that plunged 400 feet to Lee Creek's serpentine gleam. Their Subaru Outback, stickers proclaiming National Parks Pass Holder and Teach Love Inspire, bulged with a Big Agnes copper spur tent for two, a MSR pocket rocket stove for trail mix oatmeal, a Yeti Rambler full of sweet tea spiked with bourbon, binoculars for spotting pileated woodpeckers, and Emily's journal bound in leather tooled with hearts. The drive from Little Rock spanned 3 hours of podcasts on Appalachian ghosts, laughter punctuating tales of haints and hellhounds, the radio fading to static as they crested the Boston Mountains air turning crisp with the scent of leaf mold and wild persimmon. They arrived at midday on October 12, 2024, the visitor center buzzing with leaf peepers in plaid flannels, the ranger, a wiry vet named Harlan with a mustache like a broom bristle, handing over a map with a wink. Watch the crevices. Folks slip and the den don't give back easy. Emily traced the trail with a finger, excitement bubbling. Imagine the stories these rocks hold. Lovers' leaps, bandit hideouts. They shouldered packs, the weight a shared yoke, and plunged into the woods, the path a ribbon of red clay winding past civilian Conservation Corps cabins from the 1930s, their stone facades etched with time's graffiti. Sun dappled the canopy in mosaics, hickory nuts clattering like dice in the understory, a box turtle ambling across as if to bless their union. 2 miles in, they paused at a overlook, the bluff shearing away to a vertigo-inducing drop, creek below a silver thread stitching the valley. Liam pulled her close, ring glinting on her finger, sapphire for their November wedding, whispering, "This is our forever view." Lunch was pita pockets stuffed with hummus and feta, crumbs fed to chipmunks that chittered impudent demands. By 3 p.m., sweat beaded brows despite the 60-degree chill, but the burn was euphoric, each step a vow renewed. Camp they chose at Fossil Flats, a primitive site off the Butterfield Trail, a meadow cradled by boulders pocked with Devonian imprints, ancient trilobites frozen in stone, relics of eons when seas lapped these hills. The tent rose swift, poles clicking like bones settling, rainfly taut against gathering clouds that bruised the sky purple. The stove burped blue flame, boiling water for Lipton noodle soup laced with jerky bits, steam curling like genie smoke. Firewood gathered from fallen Osage orange crackled to life in a ring of creek pebbles, flames leaping greedy, casting their faces in infernal glow. They roasted hot dogs on green sticks, charring skins to burst with juice, trading bites and kisses. Emily's laughter a melody over the night's overture, crickets rasping boughs on cellos, and owls too-hoo a bass counterpoint. As stars wheeled overhead, unpolluted by city glare, Liam spun yarns of the park's namesake, a Civil War cave where deserters hid, emerging as shades to lure the unwary, their whispers promising gold but delivering doom. Emily shivered deliciously, burrowing into his side, the proposal ring cool against his ribs. "If ghosts want company," she teased, "they'll have to wait till we're old and gray." Zipped into the sleeping bag's downy nest, limbs entwined, they drifted to the rhythm of wind soughing through sycamores, dreams woven of wedding veils and valley vows. Midnight struck like a gavel, but it was the snap, twig under boot, deliberate, not dear, that wrenched Liam awake, heart jackhammering at 120. Emily slumbered on, breath soft as moth wings, but he slipped free, grabbing the headlamp from the vestibule, beam a hesitant probe into the dark. The meadow lay still, fire embers winking like conspirators, boulders hulking as slumbering behemoths. Then, movement, a flicker at the tree line, a silhouette detaching from shadow, tall and lean, clad in camo that blended with leaf litter, face obscured by a ski mask pulled low despite the mild night. Liam froze, beam dipping to avoid detection, pulse thundering in temples. The figure paused, head tilting as if scenting the air, then advanced with predatory grace, boots silent on moss, a glint in gloved hand catching starlight. Blade? Gun? Whispers followed, not from the intruder but the rocks themselves, or madness, faint, sibilant. Join the den, eternal rest. Liam's mind reeled, folklore bleeding into fear or real peril. He shook Emily gently, her eyes snapping open, confusion morphing to terror as she spotted the prowler, now 20 yards off, circling left, testing the perimeter like a wolf quartering a fold. "Run," she mouthed, but the tense zip would betray. Instead they shrank back, feigning sleep, breaths held till lungs ached. The figure halted, mere feet from the fire ring, crouching to sift ashes with bare fingers, searching for embers of life. A low chuckle escaped, muffled, chilling as grave dirt sifted. "Pretty pair, Den's been lonely." Emily's hand found Liam's, vice tight, nails drawing blood he ignored. Minutes stretched to agony, the stalker lingering, shadows stretching long across the tent like accusation. Then, miracle, a distant yip, coyotes, pack hunting, and the figure bolted upright, vanishing into underbrush with rustle like fleeing leaves. They waited an eternity, ears straining for relapse, before Liam ventured out, beam sweeping empty meadow, adrenaline sour on tongue. Probably just a drunk, he lied voice quaver betraying, but Emily's tears said truth. The park's underbelly whispers of unsolved vanishings, a 2019 case of a couple gutted on this very trail, throats slit ear to ear, bodies posed in lover's embrace amid the fossils. Dawn broke bloody, clouds hemorrhaging pink, and they broke camp hasty, packs slung as they hiked out, every rustle a relapse, every shadow a mask. But the den wasn't done. At the trailhead, bliss, until the news van, lights strobing, reporters swarming like flies on carrion. Emily Carter, Liam Voss, we need your statement. The killer's trail leads here. Horror dawned, their night stalker unmasked in morning light, a drifter named Harlan Crow, 42 ex-con, with a rap sheet of assaults from Tulsa to Tulsa, holed in the park's caves, preying on pairs for the thrill of shattering bliss. He'd struck twice before. A Missouri duo in 22, throats carved with a buckknife etched, dens due. But prints on their fire ring matched, the whispers his taunt recorded on a jogger's phone 2 sites over. Emily and Liam's untouched sight? A tease, the kill postponed for the chase's savor. They testified, voices cracking in fluorescent glare, the trial a media circus that painted them saints in flannel. Crow swung for life in Cummins' unit, but the den's echo lingers. Rocks that murmur murder, trails that tempt fate. Emily nurses on, ring retired to a drawer. Liam teaches of safer histories. Camp wisely, seeker. The devil's dens demand duets in blood, and some whispers aren't wind. They're welcomes to the grave's grand ball. Ever lain in your sleeping bag, lulled by the patter of rain on nylon, only to realize the drops tracing your cheek aren't heaven's tears but the slow seep of something sinister, a harbinger from the hollows where lost souls dissolve into dew, begging you to join their eternal vigil? In the mist-shrouded folds of Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Tennessee side, the infamous Drip Drip legend claimed its latest victim in a solo camper's 2025 unraveling, where what began as a midnight moisture morphed into a symphony of sorrow that blurred the veil between thirst and terror, leaving Sarah Klein, a 32-year-old botanist from Knoxville, forever scarred by the park's weeping wounds. Sarah, with her field notebook perpetually ink-stained and glasses perpetually fogged from humid hikes, sought the Abrams Creek backcountry site after a grant rejection that soured her academia like vinegar in wine. The Smokies had always been her sanctuary, 522,000 acres of Appalachian splendor where rhododendrons bloomed, riotous pink and black bears ambled with ursine nonchalance. She packed lean, a big Agnes Fly Creek UL-1 tent for stealthy solos, a Katahdin Hiker Pro filter for creek clarity, a few Cliff Bars, and a flask of trail mix, her Nikon D7500 for macro shots of hepatica blooms, and a DeLorme InReach satellite communicator, because even introverts need an SOS. The permit, snagged via recreation. Gov Lottery, targeted Site 24, a secluded hollow 5 miles up the Hannah Mountain Trail, elevation 3,200 feet, where old-growth hemlocks stood as cathedrals to forgotten gods, their boughs dripping condensation like perpetual requiem. The trek in on April 5, 2025, was a baptism. Spring wildflowers carpeted the path in trillium whites and violets, the air a potion of loamy earth and budding sassafras, birdsong a chorus of warblers fluting vespers. Sarah arrived at dusk, the hollow a bowl of ferns cradling a flat of leaf litter, creek gurgling 10 yards off like a gossiping brook. Tent pitched with practiced snaps, stakes sunk deep in clay that clung like guilt. She filtered water that ran clear as absolution, boiling it on her Soto Amicus for a mug of Bigelow Earl Grey that steamed herbal comfort. Fire forbidden in the site, flash banned from recent droughts. But she kindled a tea light in a tin for ambiance, its flame guttering like a hesitant confession. Journal open on knees, she sketched the hollow's contours, noting an odd depression in the duff, a sinkhole perhaps, rimmed with moss that gleamed unnaturally slick. Sight feels Watched, she scribbled, chalking it to isolation's edge, the solitude that amplified every creak. Zipped in by 9, the tent a bubble of mylar and mesh. She succumbed to fatigue. The creeks lullaby a white noise of ripples over pebbles, dreams of grant revisions dissolving into fog. 2 a.m. brought the drip, soft, insistent, a metronome on the rainfly that she dismissed as post-shower residue, rolling over with a sigh. But sleep frayed. The patter persisted, evolving, now closer, tracing the tent's seams with liquid fingers. Sarah stirred, headlamp clicking onto a beam that revealed no leaks, the fly taut and dry. Yet there it was again, plink, right above her pillow, a droplet beading on the inner mesh, swelling translucent before plummeting to splat on her cheek, cool and viscous, tasting faintly of iron when her tongue darted involuntary. "Condensation," she muttered, wiping it with her sleeve, but the rhythm accelerated. Drip, drip, 2 now, 1 on the fly, 1 inside, as if the hollow wept in stereo. Paranoia prickled. She unzipped the door, beam sweeping the clearing, hemlocks looming like hooded monks, ferns rustling in a breeze that carried no chill, the sinkhole yawning darker than pitch, its edges frayed with what looked like threads, cloth. Heart at 100 beats, she retreated, zipping fierce, but the drips multiplied. A chorus now, tapping the tent like Morse code from the mad. Drip, drip, pause, drip, drip, drip. Sleep impossible, she huddled ears, straining mind conjuring the legend she'd scoffed at in ranger talks. The drip, drip, a ghost tale from the 1940s. When a logger vanished near here, his wife searching nights till she hanged from a limb body, swaying, dripping, rain-mingled blood that locals swore wept eternally, luring solitaries to mimic her end. The night elongated, elastic with dread. By 3, the drips infiltrated, beads forming on the ceiling, not random but patterned, spelling in braille of moisture. H-E-L-P. Sarah's breath hitched, rational crumbling. She snatched the inReach, thumbing SOS, but signal blinked red. Dead zone, the hollows cupping hills a Faraday cage for fate. Drip, 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 now on her sleeping bag, soaking through to skin, each drop heavier, warmer, reeking of copper and decay. She bolted upright, beam flailing, spotting it. A fissure in the tent floor, clay parting like lips to exhale moisture. Tendrils of it creeping toward her like veins seeking suture. Outside, the sinkhole gurgled, a belch of bubbles rising and shadows stirred. Not breeze, but forms, translucent. A woman in calico, sodden and sagging, neck elongated by invisible noose, arms outstretched in supplication, mouth opening in silent plea, tears streaming to join the chorus. "Find him." "The den takes but gives no back," the apparition mouthed, or wind mimicked, voice a rustle of wet leaves. Sarah screamed, primal, scrambling for the door, zip snagging on panic, tearing free in a rend of nylon. She tumbled out, boots forgotten, bare feet sinking in duff that clutched like quicksand, beam wild on the specter. Face bloated blue, eyes milky orbs, hair a tangle of weeds and regret, the drip her dirge, falling from hem and cuff in steady tattoo. Flight instinct ignited. Sarah ran blind, beam bouncing, brambles lacerating calves, the creek a silver snake she splashed through, icy shock to shins. Behind, the hollow wailed, winds howling lament, drips swelling to downpour that wasn't rain, the woman's form pursuing, footsteps squelching wet, whispers weaving through trees. Join the vigil, drip for the lost, miles blurred, lungs raw bellows, until dawn's first smear crested Klingman's dome, gilding the trailhead lot where her Subaru waited, keys fumbled from pocket with trembling fingers. She drove to Gatlinburg in hysterics, pulling into a Waffle House where fluorescent harshness banished shades, syrup and bacon, a bulwark against breakdown. Rangers, skeptical at first, hiked the site by noon. Tent shredded, sinkhole excavated to reveal bones, small, human, a child's perhaps, tangled in rusted chain, relics from a 1947 flood that swallowed a family, The mother's body recovered swinging from that limb drips her legacy and lore. No ghosts, they said, but erosion, condensation, hysteria's hall. Yet Sarah's photos, developed later, showed orbs in the beam, threads in the moss that forensics couldn't place. She quit botany for therapy, now counsels trauma in clinics, avoiding creeks that murmur. The Smokies weep on, drips a duet for the drowned, luring the lone to listen too long. Hike heated, solitary seeker. Some patters aren't precipitation, they're pleas from the perpetually parched, and once you taste the tear, the dawn drowns in deluge.